Now it's time for Straight on the Point with Jesse T. from some undisclosed location somewhere in the world. Now, ladies and gentlemen, here's Jesse T.
Up on the Jesse T Show, right here broadcasting live on Instagram, also on Facebook.com/Jesse Torrero, as well as Periscope, Livestream, Tumblr, Google Plus, and so many more throughout the social media network and world, and the Power of Voices on our radio feed here at www.thepowerofvoices.com. I let the guys go for tonight because we're doing a special show out here on the LA fires. I'm out here at the Creek Fire in the northeast San Fernando Valley. That's about 30 minutes to 40 minutes just northeast of Hollywood and Los Angeles, about 45 minutes outside Los Angeles, give or take 20 to 25 miles from both directions. The Creek Fire, before we went on, we just were able to attend the back half of a news conference. The traffic was pretty difficult getting here. It was very tough to manage here with the freeways here in Southern California, pretty much all crowded and jam-packed. The 210 freeway, which is directly behind me, is they're not allowing people on and off the freeway unless, of course, there's an emergency, but they aren't even allowing residents on and off the freeway behind me because that's where the major fire took place over the last 24 hours, and of which 30 homes have burned out. And they want to make sure that with the evacuations that took place that were mandatory, they wanted to make sure that nobody goes back up in there and gets hurt, especially in the evening. We were trying to get some ability to drive up and around where some of the damage was here, but most of the power is out up there. As you might imagine, the fire not only burns houses and burns everything in its path, but it also burns telephone poles, melts wires, blows up transformers, and there's a lot of transformers and telephone wires and poles up in that area there that come down through there and over into the San Fernando Valley from the dam over there at the Metropolitan Water District in Sylmar, which is about north of me, another 20 miles at the entrance to the San Fernando Valley here in Los Angeles. Well, those of you who don't know and are watching us from around the world, we are on the air and everywhere from the community to the world and around the country. That is the entrance to the San Fernando Valley just north of us, and one of the largest valleys that are suburban to Los Angeles. To give you an indication, over to my right shoulder, about 45 miles is the Pacific Ocean. And the winds here have died down quite a bit. You hear them picking up just a little bit through our microphone, but the winds have died down quite a bit. And there's a lull in the windstorm. I did attend the last half of the conference and got a chance to talk to Chief Charlie Beck and Mayor Garcetti, and very much on the human trafficking side, so it was good to see them again. Of course, the Coalition Against Human Trafficking, this was one of our main target areas up here in the northeast San Fernando Valley. Had a chance to say a word or two to Deputy Roberts, Sheriff Roberts, that is, of LA County Sheriff's Department, and got a chance to talk to Chief Odessa, the LA City County Chief, about the situation that's going on here, and Captain Sandoval, the information officer for Chief Charlie Beck. At the news conference, we did find out that over 11,377 acres has burned here in the Creek Fire behind me. You don't see any flames. Pretty much behind me is all mountains. But on the other side of this ridge, which is about 1,200 to 2,000 feet high, and on the other side of that ridge, it's burning pretty profusely between a couple of canyons. If you recall who the great actor was, Patrick Swayze, he had a ranch up here, about 45 to 50 acres behind me. And when he was alive, before he passed away, his ranch was up here for about 30 to 40 years. We used to see him rolling along over here in Lakeview Terrace and Foothill and the Equine Centers and the Handsome Dam area and Shadow Hills for years with his big giant Cadillac and his brother who had those big Texas Brahma bull horns out in front of his Cadillac. But his ranch, which is no longer his ranch, it was sold after he passed away and his wife sold his estate, I believe. But it is back up behind us too as well. None of that burned out though in that respect. But over beyond those mountains behind us is pretty much wild country. I've roamed all these mountains as a kid growing up over in here. We not only roamed on bicycle and foot, we camped out in these mountains over the years when you could do that way back when I was a kid. And we rode our horses up here and our dirt bikes when we got into dirt bikes and stuff when I was a kid growing up. It's pretty hard to do that now. And one of the reasons is because of the fire damage, etc., that those kinds of activities could start. Just a different world and a different time. But it's pretty wild country up there, mountain lions and deer and all kinds of possums and raccoons and all kinds of coyotes and that kind of stuff up in that area. And it's pretty great country if you're into that kind of wilderness, but it's rough country up there. And that's why we saw during the day many fire drops that would pick up water here right in front of me, camera on the other side of this camera from Handsome Dam, the water, and they will drop in the water drop-offs right over there in that area because it's really difficult for a lot of forestry people, fire officials and stuff to get to. But 11,377 acres has burned so far, and that is a huge amount of square foot of land. Let me give you an idea. 1 acre is 43,560 square feet. Now, generally, the typical lot here in the San Fernando Valley, Sun Valley, North Hollywood, Pacoima, Sylmar, San Fernando area, or probably for that part in Los Angeles, the typical size lot is about 5,000 square feet. That's about 50 feet wide and 100 feet long. That equals 5,000 square feet. That's where your typical 1,200 square foot house sits on, and 1 acre is 43,560 square feet. So it's about 8 of those lots connected together. This is 11,377 acres, and if you multiply that for you geniuses out there who love to run numbers by 43,560 square feet times 11,377 acres, you will come out to a huge number in square footage of land that just is burned right down to the ground. And it's really a difficult situation here in this part of the Northeast Territory of the San Fernando Valley in Los Angeles because just about a year ago, the Sand Canyon fire, which started over on the other side of these mountains, about 15 to 20 miles north of us in the Sand Canyon area, Santa Clarita area, Valencia area, that Sand Canyon fire burned over this hilltop and here into the San Fernando Valley and threatened many homes. It didn't burn any homes here. It burned homes on the other side of this 3 or 4 peak mountain ridge and the Sand Canyon fire, and had about 35 to 40,000 acres of land that was burned, but mostly open territory and open country. So LA has been hit real hard in the last 24 months by 2 major fires. They at that time had 3,500 fire officials, firefighters, forestry people and rangers and all of that fighting the fire up there in the Sand Canyon fire last year. This year they've had 11. They reported at the news conference, which Brian I really wanted to get to. I just couldn't get it in time to get the show on in time. It ended before the Jesse T show, Roundup started. So the news conference did report to us that about 1,100 firefighters are on the line right here protecting this area, trying to keep the minimal damage to houses that has already been done. Over 30 homes have burned to the ground. Now, folks, if you've ever seen this kind of damage, and I wish I could bring it to you here and get up into some of those areas. I'm still working hard right now. I've got one of my associates are helping me call a certain forestry and county fire official to see if we can get brought up into some of these areas and we can see some of this damage that's being very well patrolled by LAPD and LA County Sheriffs. The thing is, some of the houses, when they burn to the ground, and if you've been watching any TV today about Ventura, the Thomas Fire, which has burned 85 square miles. That's about 70,000 square acres. That's 7 times larger than this. Unbelievable when you think about it. It's burned hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of homes out. And the devastation and the absolute loss and the absolute pain and sadness is overwhelming. If you've ever had the opportunity to watch a house burn, what you're doing is you're watching somebody's life burn and be destroyed forever and ever and ever. And that is got to be one of the saddest things that one could ever watch and have happen to them. I mean, we are talking about memories that can never be replaced. We are talking about sentimentality. We're talking about moms and grandmas and brothers and sisters and last letters written and marriages and photos and videos and important things that people leave for their legacy, and it just makes you cry. It has got to be the most heart painful thing outside of a loved family member dying that you could possibly go through. Even though insurance is there, and we hope that the insurance companies honor their obligations, even though the insurance is there, it still never replaces the memories, the activities, the love that a home has for its family. Absolute loss, and absolute loss in your heart. You talk about a hole in your heart. Even some firefighters have lost their houses in the Thomas Fire just west of us about 2 hours. It is beyond words that can describe the loss. And I really wanted to show you some of these homes before the sunset, because it is just words can't explain what pictures and videos can show. The firefighters up here tonight are working hard to contain this fire. We found out that it's 5% contained. The Creek Fire, that's only 5%, but at least it's 5% contained. The fire down in Thomas, the Thomas Fire, has 0 containment. Absolutely no containment, and it's still burning crazy. Some of the fire has burned across the 101 freeway, Pacific Coast Highway, and right to the Pacific Ocean. Much of the fire has burned down into Ventura, the city of Ventura. I used to live there. I have a dozen radio stations in that area. And watching some of the devastation today on the TV was unbelievable, because I lived there and I worked there, and that was a community I spent a lot of time in. Even though I was raised in this community here, this is overwhelming what's happening here. The Thomas Fire, we found out earlier today, has burned thousands of homes. And that number, they're saying, is going to go up when it's all said and done. The devastation is, well, I've never had that happen to me. If you've had that happen to you, you know what I'm talking about. The devastation brings a man to his knees, and all you can do is hug your loved ones and be thankful to God that you or no one you know lost their life. The heroics that have taken place from the citizens and the neighbors. There's one story they talked about at the conference here today, the news conference, that up here on McBroom, behind me in Shadow Hills, several houses caught on fire there, but they were able to stop that when the embers last night, through the high winds, jumped across about a mile of open space to catch the one on the McBroom side, Shadow Hills area, on fire. The The neighbor had fallen asleep. An old lady who had been living in her house for 65 to 70 years on McBroom. I built 3 houses on McBroom 30 years ago, 25 years ago. I know right where that street is. It's a beautiful street with a view that just won't stop of the Angeles National Forest and Big Tahunga and Little Tahunga Canyons. Horse property, equine property. They got San Francisco fire down here. They're coming from all around the state and all around California to help out and assist here. As the fire chief said at the conference, pretty much LA City's resources are gone. LA County's resources have all been spent. And so the state and Governor Stupido Brown, who I've never been much party of, a person that liked him, at least did something right and said this is a statewide national emergency. And this Mayor Confetti Garcetti, who I have not been much of a fan of either, even though I know him and he knows I'm not much of a fan of his. But he's a good guy anyway. But he's a little ding-dongy, I think. Oh yeah, I know, I gotta say a little thing here or there. But it's me, Jesse T, you know. But the thing is, LA County, LA City's resources are spent, and this mayor designated LA City as a state of an emergency, city of emergency as well. This kind of gives you an indication of what would happen if this was a county and citywide major 9.5 or 10-point earthquake. I don't even want to think about that. But when these fire crossed the big natural fire line of Handsome Dam in the wash area behind me now, it's about a mile wide. The embers flew in the air last night from the heavy wind, and you can hear the wind picking up just a little bit here at 5:30 or so West Coast time. They are expecting the wind to start picking up and perhaps hit 80-mile-an-hour gusts later on tonight. And that simply is not a good thing. The embers caught a house on fire from a little old lady that's lived there for 65 to 70 years. And she was sound asleep. Her husband died about a year before. And I believe I remember who they were. He used to come into Bud's Donuts right next to my real estate office years ago. I believe the gentleman had an old car, an old blue Ford. Anyhow, he didn't want us to build those 3 houses up there. We built, and he fought us. But that's okay. He passed away due to old age about a year ago. And she didn't have a lot of family left. And she was sound asleep, and the embers started flying in the air. And her neighbors, who were one step above her, sort of in a terraced kind of situation, one house above, were up all night long, dousing down their whole backyard and roof and sides of their house and everything. They had a pump for their pool to use up all the water in their pool all night long, and they saw that her roof started catching on fire. So they tried to douse some of that fire off the roof, but it was just a little farther than their hoses could reach. It couldn't reach that far. So they tried to do everything they could to use that pool of water and that pump, and they worked feverishly. But the roof on that old lady's house caught on fire at the other end and caught on fire. So one of the young men kicked the door down and woke her up about 2:30 or 3 in the morning and picked her up out of bed and went through the house, brought her outside, and right then the fire had collapsed the roof basically in her master bedroom, living room area. Now that story was told here at the conference, and it just shows you the heroics that people are doing here to help the neighbor, and that is a heartwarming thing. I love to see that because sometimes I have my doubts about our society today, as you know, when I talk about it on the Jesse T Show. Americans do rise to the occasion to help each other. I do wish we would rise to the occasion to help each other and be kind all the time. But they saved her life. Her house burned to the ground. And what a tragedy. Not only did her husband die a year before, but the house she's been in for 65 or 70 years burned to the ground with all the family mementos. But at least she was alive. So these are some of the stories that we're hearing about here throughout the village here that they have created. Now, I'm not going to go over and bother the firefighters. I'm going to walk over there and kind of show you this sort of tent city, this community, this city that they built. And the reason why, I just give you a long shot. I don't want to bother these men and women because they've been working hard, and the last thing they need is me, Jesse T, interrupting their rest time and their food time. But I did notice that here in the village, the command center, the super trucks have come in, these giant semis that have sleeper beds in each of them, and they're coming in left and right. I mean, these are super long mobile sleeper trucks from a company called Mobile Sleeper Company, and they're parking them and setting them all up. They must have at least 10 or 12 of them now that have been rolling in continuously since we've been on the air and everywhere here on the Jesse T Show and Roundup. The sleeper trucks are really cool because they allow the firemen to at least have a soft place to rest their head. So I'm just going to give you a long shot over here. We not only have fire officials and sheriff officials and police officials, some of the politicians, community activists. I saw a couple of friends of mine that were here that worked real hard with me in the fight against human trafficking. I haven't been in this area conducting any community activity for about a year now, a little less. Been moving on to other locations, but it's good to see some faces out here. And I know that a lot of the folks around here have come together to help one another. Most of the equine animals and the horses are all gone. There are still some up there. They moved out. Pierce College is filled up. Pomona's filled up. Antelope Valley, they're taking them in. El Monte's taking them in. Folks that have 10, 15 acres down here in the flatland are taking them in. So I'm just going to kind of give you a long shot here over my shoulder. You can see this is where so many above my head here are eating right now and being provided food services and relaxing. We're not going to go over there. We're not going to really talk to them, but you can kind of see that the Handsome Dam area has become a small city and a community. We saw this thing the other day. This thing was the same way the other day. The other day in Sand Canyon. Also, what you have is you have people that are doing jail time and prisoners that come up here and they work on the forestry trucks, and that's what the guys on the orange are. And they march them around, they take care of them, and they make sure that they don't run away. We're going to move on. I'm going to get back to the Gray Ghost. I'm going to keep on. Hopefully we'll be able to keep this signal and it won't fizzle around too much. But we're going to move on and see if I can find some more activity, get on the road here a little bit and see what we can do. Maybe I can tag along in behind a couple other big giant media network trucks and see what we can find out. But the wind still has not completely picked up tremendously, though we're hearing more and more emergency service vehicles coming in here and adjusting themselves onto the freeway, the California Highway Patrol. So this is Jesse T, broadcasting live out here at the command center of the Creek Canyon Fire here in the northeast San Fernando Valley and in the Handsome Dam area over to my right, over this way. I guess that's a lake filled full of water that they've been taking water out of. And we're going to move on down here to the Gray Ghost and see where we can find out and get rolling a little bit. If we do lose you a little bit, we'll reconnect ourselves back up with the station, and we'll make that happen. So Lee will be letting me know about that. I was able to catch a little bit of the end of the news conference. And before we went on the air, I posted it up on our Facebook site, facebook.com/Jesse Torrero. I posted it up there just before our show started on the Jesse T Show. So you may want to check out some of the information we gleaned from the LA County, LA Fire Department chief, as well as the Captain Sandoval, the information officer for Chief Charlie Beck. So you might want to check that out on facebook.com/Jesse Torrero. And we interrupted the normal Roundup show today because the fires are very important and we wanted to get out here and cover it as much as we could, at least for today, and to give you some updates and stuff like that. So we're going to roll a little bit right now in the Great Ghost. Just be with me and bear with me as I hold everything in one hand. It's amazing. It's an amazing thing. Let's see, I got to find my keys to the Gray Ghost. You know, this has been an area that hasn't burned like this for a long time. Though we had the Sand Canyon fire that burned over, but the area still, there are large swaths and paths of land that have lots of underbrush. One of the things we learned about at the conference was that the reason why this is happening, some of the questions that I got a chance to hear, I didn't have the opportunity to pop in here because I got kind of at the end of the conference. But one of the questions that I was able to hear one of the reporters say was, "Do you think there has been arson and involved here?" And the Chief Charlie Beck said, "No, we don't have any indication that there was arson." The fire chief, both LA County and LA City, agreed that it doesn't look like arson, and they went on to explain how they believe perhaps these fires have started. And how they believe they have started was that because we haven't had any rain in August, September, October, November, and December, what has taken place is all the rain that we had last year grew so much more vegetation and underbrush that the underbrush that was there and the new vegetation and underbrush that has dried out in these dry winds and this dry climate here in Southern California, when the Santa Anas started blowing in, a lot of times these things just start by nature, by friction. Isn't that crazy? Well, a long time ago, historically, the indigenous people that lived in this area for thousands of years, way before the Spaniards and the Russians got here. Yeah, the Russians were down into Washington and Oregon. They actually, Washington, Oregon, and the northwestern territory of Canada, Alaska, was all Russian territory. We negotiated that away, our presidents did, and we also took it away. And the Spaniards, of course, came up from the south. So, before these people came, the indigenous people knew the San Fernando Valley as it was called the Valley of Smoke in their indigenous languages. My light here may go out. If it does, I'm going to have to find a post-up place under a light. But it was called the Valley of Smoke. And the reason why is that the valley and the mountains were always catching on fire. They always caught on fire in Southern California. This is nothing new to nature. It's a natural progression of nature here in Southern California. So the mountains were always on fire. Something was always burning. And so the whole valley was always enveloped in smoke. Not only the dust from the high winds blowing up the high deserty area here, because this is all reclaimed desert. In fact, Los Angeles, the only reason why it's got any green in it at all, other than the mountaintops, is because we humans have planted vegetation. So that's simple. So I do remember back when I was a kid growing up here, and the fires we would have all the time. September through October. Unbelievable fires. All the time. And they would burn all the way to the Pacific Ocean. They would start over here on the northeast San Fernando Valley, burn across the mountains, circling the whole San Fernando Valley, cross what was then known as Bob Hope's land, which is now a park. He donated it to the county, and burn right through Las Virgenes or Malibu and Canyon Dune Road, right to the ocean. In fact, I do remember when the Malibu colony caught on fire in the 1980s. That was not an unusual thing. It really wasn't. But what has changed between now and then is that the population has grown. The same thing that has caused the animals to be encroached on, and they have nowhere to go, like the black bears up in the brown bears that are up in Los Angeles National Forest, in Pasadena, in Altadena, in Duarte, in Sierra Madre, these areas where we get bears coming down into people's backyards, and mountain lions in Griffith Park, and lots of coyotes and deer and possum and raccoon and deer and coyotes in Burbank. And here's the reason why. The encroachment of population has forced these animals, which were their normal areas that they roamed in, now where houses and streets and things are, they still roam the normal areas because it's their instinct to do that, but yet our human beings have now taken over where they naturally were, and we've encroached upon their natural habitat. So there is, of course, issues. Well, the same thing has happened with development. The development has gone to the point that we're building houses up on mountainsides and mountaintops and ridge tops. We're not talking a house here and a house there like it used to be. We're talking about hundreds and hundreds of neighborhoods, houses that have neighborhoods of 500 homes in areas that there were no houses before, even when I was a kid, and I'm only going back a few decades. And so now the human beings and their homes have encroached upon the natural burn areas of the San Fernando Valley and Southern California. See, fire doesn't have a brain. Fire just burns where fire has always burned. You can't stop it from burning, and you can't change the direction of it. Fire and water are probably the two most destructive and powerful elements of God's blue green earth. It goes where it wants to go. And water is even more destructive than fire, because water destroys everything. Fire, you can put retardant down. You can do lots of things like in today's modern technology. But fire will burn where fire always has burned. And so our houses now and our population, look at, we learned at the conference today that right here in the northeast San Fernando Valley, 150,000 people were evacuated. 100,000 people just north of me, 5 minutes, were evacuated out of Sylmar. 50,000 people were evacuated from the Thomas fire. 30,000 residents were evacuated. 15,000 residents were evacuated in these areas, times 3. So what we've seen here is an overpopulated area with lots of building and lots of construction on natural fire burn areas that burn every 25, 50, 500, 100 years, just like floods. So in a lot of ways, it's our own doing, isn't it? It's a terrible thing to say, but maybe we should have better urban development and understand the natural habitat a little bit more. Now, that's not an excuse, and I'm not saying it's all humans' fault, and I'm not eliminating the pain and loss of what has taken place. I do hope the insurance companies live up to their obligations, those dirty rat bastards, because they are. But we built up houses to where the fires used to be. When I saw the fires when I was 7, 10, 14, 22, burn all the way to the ocean. And no housing structures burned. Very few, because there simply weren't any houses there to burn. And now there are lots of houses. And when it runs into houses, it has more fuel to burn. So it kind of, one problem begats another problem, doesn't it? So these fires have become much more disastrous, much more dangerous, much more explosive, much faster moving than ever before. So that's some things to consider in terms of how this fire has erupted and taken place over the last 24 to 48 hours, and it is still not done yet. The winds, the meteorologist that was at the news conference reported that the winds are probably going to pick up to 80 miles an hour through the canyon, 60 to 80 miles an hour here through the canyons. We hope not. Right now they're died down to almost nothing, but it's only 5:30, 5:45 West Coast time. And these winds usually start picking up around 7, 8, 9, 10 o'clock as the temperature starts to drop, the high and low pressures mix, you got winds. And if we're talking those kind of winds, we're talking hurricane winds that start at 74, 75 miles an hour. And while the firefighters up there now are dousing as much as they can, and the helicopters that are still rolling out here at night are doing as much as they can, but as the smoke thickens, they can't see the mountains, so they have to curtail, especially when the winds start up, they have to curtail the water drops. And that's just creek fire. Now we have the Thomas fire, which is completely zero contained. We have the Screwball fire when it went on the air, it was zero contained. We have the Rye fire, Rye Canyon fire in Santa Clarita. That was about 10% contained when we went on air. I saw it coming in. We have the San Bernardino fire that's completely contained. All these fires hitting at once here in Southern California. So we're doing Roundup, but we're kind of rounding up the fire, talking about that, winding up our good thoughts together and positive thinking that these winds won't come together tonight and won't cause any more damage and pain and hardship and loss. The loss. I can't imagine losing pictures of my mom, my grandma, my great-grandma, Doc Roberts, who was one of the first cavalry veterinarians in the late 19th century, fought Indians in Oklahoma territory. I can't imagine losing these tomahawks that they found when my family, when the Oklahoma land rush happened, my family staked out the amount of land they could stake out, and they had to fight natives. And we actually have a half a dozen native-made tomahawks that are 100 plus years old, 200 maybe. I can't imagine losing that stuff. My pictures of my babies, pictures of my cherished animals, my dogs, pictures of my father, pictures, the family momentums of the things my kids have earned, the stuff I've earned in my lifetime, my folks, my mom, my dad, my grandma, My wife, Mama T, her things. I can't imagine. Insurance can't replace that. Insurance is in the business of not spending money. So, they're going to fight tooth and nail for everything like they always do. It's sad in a lot of ways, actually, these insurance companies. But we hope they don't do that here. But can you imagine losing everything? Everything. And there's nothing you can do about it. Think about that for a moment. Nothing you can do about it. To watch everything you've ever had in your lifetime, your collections, your furniture, your clothes, go up in flames. And that has been compounded thousands of times in the last 24 to 36 hours here in Southern California. Let's not even forget about up north in Northern California, the fire that hit the wine country. Just rampaged through neighborhoods. I remember when I was a kid. I was about 9 years old. I was coming back from Van Nuys, San Fernando Road, Pacoima, and the Boys and Girls Club. Myself, Fat Michael, Four-Eyed Gigi, Bucktooth Jeff, and Mr. Talky Talk, me. We all had nicknames, That's when Americans had thick skin, not the politically correct sissy butts that there are out there today. But I remember coming back on our bicycles from the Boys and Girls Club where we just had a training session with Benny the Jet Ukitis, world champion, kickboxing and a boxer. I was all but maybe 8 or 9 years old. And one of the houses caught on fire by the Foothill Division Police Department on Osborne and San Fernando Road. And we saw it. So we rushed our bikes over there, and we got there just as when the fire department got there. And the flames were bursting out of the windows. Family was standing in the front yard. Firemen went in there, crashing through the doors with their hoses on top of the roof. I just sat there with my jaw open and watched it. All my friends decided they just went home. They weren't interested, and I watched it. All the way till they put the fire out. I got in kind of trouble, too, because I was supposed to be home before then with Grandma T. I was in awe of a couple of things that at 8 or 9 years old really hit me hard. Not hard, but hit me, touched me. The absolute heat and power and ferociousness of that fire. It made a noise. This humming, growling sound. This was just one house. And the heroics of these firemen. Look at, man. They were like military guys running right up the hill when 50 caliber machine guns are shooting at them, 50 of them. They ran right into that flaming house of fire through the front door and the back door with their hoses and their axes. They got on the roof and ripped apart the roof. This place is gushing flames. Well, I knew right then and there I wasn't going to be a fireman. There was no way. They had the tanks of oxygen on too. But I remember And I remember watching the family. The mom, dad, kids, they were just crying. Dad was trying not to cry. Standing there with a stoic chin. His wife is in shambles on the ground. His daughter, son were just hugging their mom, crying. And this family, apparently, I heard, had been in the house for a long time. Handed down from their family. And they just sat there, stood there. Luckily, nobody died. There were no animals in there. But I remember watching their faces. Just stared at them. And I thought about my house. And I thought, like an 8-year-old could think that, oh, I just thought about my mom and dad. And watching them I can remember that day like it was yesterday. Like it was yesterday. I can remember that day, the sound and the smell and the family and the tears. And I remember I after it was all done, I rode my bike home. I had an orange crate. Schwinn. And my mom was there, and she said, "Where you been, Jesse Glenn?" And all I could do was drop my bike in the front yard and run and hug my mother. And start crying. She said, "What's wrong?" I said, "I saw this house burn and the family." And I asked her, "Would that ever happen to us?" She said, "No, never." We need to pray for what's going on today. Pray for those who lost everything in the hurricanes. Pray for those who lost everything today. It's Roundup, baby. The Jesse T Show. Hey, I can't help but being me, Jesse T. Reporting live from the Creek Canyon fire in the northeast San Fernando Valley, this is Jesse Torrero on thepowervoices.com. KTNT Radio and TV, broadcasting and podcasting live on thepowervoices.com. The Jesse T Show, the Brown Beauty, is off duty. See ya.